This year, we started with Indianapolis and we're working our way down. We'll say it's because I wanted to get to Altoona quicker because I always want to get to Altoona quicker. Part of that was also, maybe a little bit of scheduling conflicts and different stuff. But I'm happy that we're in Altoona, bringing back Jon Mozes. That's no H, and at spelled with a Z from the at Altoona Curve. Jon, how you doing today, brother?
Doing great, man. Looking forward to more sunshine. See the Bucs are on against the Blue Jays this afternoon, so I'll catch that in a little bit. It's
Yeah, and definitely it's row day. Everybody's anticipating what Rwanzi is going to look like this season. I mean, obviously, I don't even know if everybody's going to be looking at the pitch shapes. They're probably just going to be looking straight at the gun to see what that velocity looks like.
yeah. I mean, from what I understand, Rowanzi stayed in Tampa and stayed hanging around Pirate City to do his workouts, and then I don't know, saw some socialing that he's back into the mid high 90s, which was the guy we saw in Altoona in 2021, and that guy looked like the guy who's going to hold down a starting job in the big leagues for a while. So hopefully he can put it all together this year. He's a fun guy to watch.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely want to see that happen. Definitely want to see that. But we're going to talk some minor league baseball here. This is a minor league baseball program. Before we hopped on here, I said the first thing I noticed about the Altoona Curve this year is a lot of new faces to Altoona. But not new to the organization, new manager, new hitting coach, new pitching coach, and then also adding Taylor Davis, former Pirates farmhand. We did get to see him in the major leagues a little bit. Guy is a character. Anybody that hasn't seen, I know it's like either like a video or something out there of every single time he catches the camera, he makes faces at it or has sunglasses on. The dude's a great personality, but is a great baseball mind as well. Adding him to the catching and game planning coaching. Yeah, just a lot of changes going on in Altoona there.
Well, yeah. I mean, this. I think this is the nature of it every year that player development will like take a look at coaching staffs and who was where, and then sort of assess how it went that year and how they should go going forward. I mean, I've heard some great things about Robbie Hammock. A guy that has a lot of major league experience. A catcher. Those guys always seem to think the game really well. So I'm looking forward to meeting Robbie. I'll see him down at Pirate City coming up in a couple weeks here, and I'm happy for my man Drew Bennis going back to AAA as the full time pitching coach. He filled in with Altoona last year, and had been with Altoona as the pitching coach in 21 and 22. So happy he's going to be there. I've heard nothing but good things about Fernando Nieve, another former big leaguer who's going to be on the Altoona coaching staff this year as the pitching coach. So this should be a fun group. It sounds like it'll be cool.
Yeah, and we definitely talked about, like I said once again before we hopped on here, we talked about that adding that catching and the game planning coach and talking about like how Chad Noble had been kind of like the roving instructor throughout the minors last year. He's going to be in Taylor's position at AAA this year. But just having a guy who is, specializing in the catching aspect, which is not something that, I mean, you see a lot, but it's something that is needed throughout the minor leagues because it's such like that little niche aspect of the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? You go back over the years, and it's like we've got a hitting coach for all the hitters, we've got a pitching coach for all the pitchers. For the catchers, yeah, we'll help you, hit, sure, but yeah, I think you're right about that. That's sort of more direct coaching for catchers, I think, is pretty important. You look at the last couple of years and some of the prospects that have come through behind the plate over the last few years: Endy Rodriguez, Henry Davis, Abraham Gutierrez, Jason DeLay. You want to have catchers in the organization you can trust when they get there. So look, somebody like Chad Noble, who's now going to be on the staff at AAA, Chris Truby, who's the infield coordinator, he's going to be stationed at AAA for most of their home games and then do some roving otherwise. I really like that idea. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? The whole point of this is to develop players as individual skills. And I think the best way to do that is direct instruction with an expert that has, just recently caught, right? Taylor Davis, a dozen years as a player, and, this is his first coaching opportunity. And, we've been fortunate in Altoona to have Gary Green working as our infield and bench coach the last couple of years. And Gary just has an incredible amount of knowledge about how to do it. And guys sort of gravitate him. And you can tell, like, the daily work that players and infielders put in with Gary Green, it makes a difference. I think the number one example of that is Liover Peguero, where he just became so much more consistent because he was working with Gary Green every day on some of those angles. And now, you're seeing in the big leagues where, he might be the everyday second baseman this year.
Yeah, and talking about, not to go back to the majors again, but Peguero made an absolutely difficult, rangy play during spring training, and people, it's kind of eye-opening for them because they didn't know that was kind of in there, and seeing that development from players, because there are question marks. Not everybody is going to be a Jared Triolo or a Key Brian Hayes or a guy that may be in Altoona this year in a Jack Brannigan. Like, not everybody is that solid a defense walking onto the field, and they may need some stuff to work on. And a lot of these guys are also very young as well. I think that's things that we kind of forget with that. But last year, kind of sticking with like Peguero a little bit here, I looked at the opening day lineup for the Altoona Curve last year. The starter was Kyle Nicholas. Catching was Henry Davis. At shortstop was the previously mentioned Peguero. And on the bench was Joshua Palacios. And this is something we talked about in the review for last season, was that the number of guys that started out in Altoona and either made their, major league debuts, or for, in Peguero's case, like his, he had the tiniest of cups of coffees in the major leagues, but had made the way from Altoona the whole way to the majors last year. So, I'm going to put you on the spot here right away, John, a little bit, is, guys that could potentially be on the Altoona roster this year. Obviously, rosters and assignments haven't been made, but a guy that could possibly, make a jump, or a guy that maybe finished the year in Altoona last year, and we may see their major league debut this season.
I think the number one for that is Paul Skeens. It sounds like Skeens is probably on track to start at Double-A this year, which, I'm pretty fired up about. I'd love to watch that guy in person. It's really impressive stuff, even though it was only, 3 innings or whatever with Altoona last year. I think he's probably the most likely guy that could sort of make that jump from Altoona to the major leagues this year. But there is so much depth in this starting pitching staff. You're looking at, let's remember, these are guys that are very young. Anthony Solomito just turned 21 last year during the season. Bubba Chandler turned 21 last September. Those two guys are probably there. We'll probably see a full year of Braxton Ashcraft. Kraft was coming back from Tommy John last year, so sort of limited to 2 and 3 inning outings as they tried to rebuild that inning count for him. And the stuff looks incredible. He's got 2 major league weapons with the curveball and the fastball in the mid 90s. And then you add Sean Sullivan and Thomas Harrington, and you're looking at 6 guys that are going to give you a chance to win every day to start the season in Altoona. So I think the starting pitching is probably the story early in the year. And on the position player side, it's sort of tough to say, right? There's a lot of guys that are sort of in that infields group right now in Pittsburgh, because you got to figure out sort of what second base looks like and how that trickles down. But, Sung-Chae Chang is a guy that could play his way into a major league role this year with his speed and his ability to get on base. And, he can play short. I'm sure he'll get some reps at second base this summer as well. So he'll sort of have some of that versatility when he gets there.
Yeah, it's definitely, that's what I was talking about, was the formidable, is what I called it, the pitching staff. There's just a lot of guys that can be there. And I think we even talked about this in the preview last year. I did go back and listen to that this past weekend. Is just that if a guy starts in Altoona, and even sometimes if a guy starts in AAA, and you would think they would be at the majors, don't really see that as like a failure. It's kind of a good thing that you have so much depth. And then also, I mean, Ben Charrington, since he's been here, has talked about giving the guys like, I don't know if it was like, he talks about like, it's almost like a plane. I don't know if it was like having the runway to kind of take off and then like the landing strip to land in a spot and be successful. So,
Mm.
I mean, if a guy's been in Double A for all of last year, it wouldn't be a bad thing for him to start the year in Double A again. A lot of times people would say, "Oh, that's a repeat," but for Charrington, a lot of times it's come down to depth, and it's also come down to letting a player start a year with success.
Mm.
Before they move on to the next level. So I definitely don't see it as that. A lot of people are probably looking for, some pretty quick call ups from Altoona. Jared Jones was a little bit of a surprise for me last year. Might have been because of some injuries at the major leagues, AAA, but definitely showed out there. But I mean, I could see some guys taking some big steps forward. So if you had to, kind of see like a guy, looking the other way, from like maybe Greensboro or somebody finished in Greensboro last year, landing in Altoona this year, who are some guys that you have on your mind for Altoona's lineup this season?
I think Jack Brannigan is a name that is probably pretty likely for Altoona at some point this year. Jackson Glenn's probably going to be back. I mean, he looked great with the Curve a year ago. But I think, Tamar Johnson's probably on the radar for some point this year. This might be the year for Tamar Johnson where if he gets off to a good start that, he ends up in the futures game and that maybe he ends up in Altoona, in the second half of the year. I think that's a guy that the Pirates are pretty excited about because, I mean, he can really swing it from what I understand. So, I think those are two position players I'd like to keep an eye on, sort of to start the year. And maybe it's a question mark about whether or not those two guys start in Altoona, whether there's a spot for them to play every day to start the year. I'm looking to see a little more from Jace Bowen. We got him for probably 6 or 7 games at the end of the season last year, and it's sort of an interesting profile. He can run and play some center field. He's going to hit for some power. Hit almost 20 homers last year. It is, I guess the question mark for me with Jace is the power going to translate at Double A, playing in more hitter-friendly environments? I think that's a question you have for a lot of hitters that come up from Greensboro because it's such a hitter-friendly environment at Greensboro, and then in Altoona, it's very much a pitcher-friendly environment in the home ballpark. So, and then it's the talent level overall. How do those guys cut it against sort of the higher level of pitching? Guys that can land breaking stuff for strikes consistently in Double A level, which is probably not as common at High A. So it's going to be interesting to sort of see how some of these guys come back. And when you're talking about repeaters, there's a couple of guys that'll be back, right? Abraham Gutierrez missed some time with an injury last year, but I think he's really got a chance to hit. We'll see what the sort of change in approach looks like for Matt Frazier this year. He put together more contact a year ago, just putting his bat on the ball more often, and he ended up hitting for a higher average than he did when he played every day for Altoona in 2022. So, can Frazier sort of put it all together because he's got such great speed defensively that he can probably be a factor defensively in the big leagues. So you don't want to give up on a guy like that. So I'm sort of interested to see sort of what kind of work guys put in the offseason and what the focuses are at spring training for guys to get off to a good start.
Yeah, and Jack Brannigan, I mean, got to see him, in spring training here a little bit. Already made like a web gem. If anybody hadn't seen it, go check out like the Young Bucks site. Like this guy, it's just in the vein of a Jared Triolo. Not saying they're the same type of player. I know that Brannigan comes with a little bit more power out of the gate. Has a little bit more swing and miss. Something we want to see, corrected a little bit. But I mean, a lot of that. I said you don't know how many people in Greensboro is guess what? When we're growing up, what do you want to do? You want to hit home runs, and you start to be able to poke them out, in Greensboro a little bit. And I did a whole segment on the dimensions of all the fields within the Sally League, and there was a lot of weird dimensions, and there weren't too many big ballparks. They weren't like the same size as, in Greensboro, but I mean, that could kind of like maybe you want to stick to just like what you're doing, but I mean, as a young kid, you're also trying to make an impression on, the big league club. You're trying to do different
Yeah.
stuff like that, and you start poking some out there, and it can get a little bit tempting because that's something that we've seen a little bit here as the guys coming up. Uh, Trying to having to change their approach and not getting as much power or that fly ball to right field towards the coaster in Altoona is landing in somebody's gloves when they're thinking it's going to be over the fence. So it's definitely a big adjustment period for some of those
Yeah.
players. So we've seen it with Frazier, saw it a little bit with Gorski. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, if that is something that, is bringing. It's been a thing where you kind of bring up the Greensboro manager at times to Altoona, and just seeing like, okay, guys, we're going to stick with this same approach that we had, and not really focus on the launch angle and stuff just yet. Maybe who knows? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good adjustment for hitters, right? Because, when you play in the major leagues, you're going to play in a hitter-friendly environment, right? Like you're going to play games at Coors Field in Colorado, or you're going to play games at San Diego at Petco Park, which is a, very pitcher-friendly environment. So, I think it's a good lesson for hitters that they learn as a minor leaguer that I have to stick within what I do, regardless of what building I'm in. I have to play to my strengths every day.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, and you missed Great American Small Park, as I call it, in Cincinnati. I
Yeah,
mean,
there you go. Right, Cincinnati.
it's just another one that, yes, I mean, it's basically staying true to who you are and maybe being able to adjust when you're playing at certain places. But I mean, honestly, it's, I think that a lot of times we're just like, oh, it's, development is not linear. It's not easy,
Yeah.
and it's definitely something that people can, I mean, take steps back and be able to adjust and maybe move forward. But I mean, it's going to be an interesting season in Altoona this year. I mean, especially for me, I'm trying to think if I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get out there to get the Paul Skeens bobblehead. I mean, believe me, I definitely do want it. But it's gonna be a year of pushing towards Indianapolis. But I mean, like you said, as the top prospects have kind of made it to the majors this year, it starts kind of a little bit of a backlog. But that's not a bad thing. And you mentioned like players like Termar Johnson and players that we're gonna get to see. And I mean, the one for me that definitely, I mean, something that Ben Cherington has done is if a player is added to the 40-man, and you mentioned like in a Chang and in an Ashcraft, he's not afraid to make that leap and sometimes over AAA. I'm just kind of wondering your thoughts on that, John, of just like the leap from Double A to the majors. It's something that Ben Cherington has done. I don't know if that's a good thing, a bad thing, or if it's just something that's part of the discussion point.
I mean, look, I think the leap in play is significant. From a pitcher's perspective, at Double A, one of the benchmarks is being able to land breaking stuff to both sides of the plate as a starting pitcher and commanding your fastball to both sides of the plate, and then showing a third option. If you're going to be a starting pitcher, whether that's a changeup, a split finger, a cutter, whatever. But the consistency level is so different in the major leagues where those guys do those things every day, no matter what. You might see it, good for a week or 2 weeks or so when a guy is playing at Double A. But, the guys that get promoted out of Double A quickly are the guys that are consistently great with their tools immediately. I thought there was a chance Liover Peguero was going to be that kind of guy where, he just hit his way out of the league and then, opponents made an adjustment to him. And, down the stretch in 2022, he sort of had a tough year adjusting to how pitchers were dealing with him. And then, he shows up as a repeat in Altoona in 2023, and he bumps his walk rate by like 10%, which is huge. Because Leover is up there trying to swing, right? Like he's up there trying to hit the ball, which is okay. That's his strength. That's his approach. That's how he wants to play the game. But, he started to become much more selective at the plate. He became so much more consistent in his ability to recognize spin that he stopped swinging at pitches that were just not strikes in the first place. That was sort of what hampered him in 22 with Altoona. So, once you get to Double A, you sort of get identifying markers from your opponent about where the holes in your game are, and then it's about how consistently can you close up those holes. And I would say that is probably the biggest difference between playing at Double A and playing in the big leagues. So that is a huge jump, right? To all of a sudden become somebody that can consistently cover up their own weaknesses in their game so that they don't hurt them on the field. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely. I mean, baseball is not easy, man. And I'm not going to make it easy for you here at the end. I need, and I did this to Jack McMullen from Indianapolis as well. I'm looking for one hitter and one pitcher, and you can't say Skeens because I don't know how long he's going to be in Altoona, but just one pitcher and one hitter that you are looking to, I wouldn't say break out, but you're looking for like some very strong seasons from this year and that you're keeping an eye on from the get-go.
I think on the mound, it's Bubba Chandler. I'm telling you, man, like the fastball that he showed at the end of the season in his one start with Altoona, like that's the type of elite grade fastball that plays in the big leagues. And he showed the ability to land his breaking ball for strikes and command everything to both sides of the plate. I mean, he was not a good pitcher the first half of the season last year at Greensboro. And then, he was pretty outspoken about it, about how he took his time during the All-Star break last year and just sort of said, okay, I have to go full speed into this, and had a much different mindset. And that sort of, allowed him to take off in the second half. I'm looking to see that come back, right? Like, is that mindset back to start the year? Because if it is, with the type of tools that he has, he's flying out of Double A in 2 months. You know what I mean? Like, he's got the type of stuff that will play in the big leagues pretty soon. On the hitting side, who's my breakout guy? I've heard very good things about Trace Gonzalez. I haven't seen him yet. That was somebody that Calix Crabb, our manager last year, was pretty excited about, thinking that he had a chance to get to Double A last year. It didn't end up working out that way. But I think that's a guy that's probably on the radar for us in Altoona this year. Trace Gonzalez, a little bit of a smaller guy, but apparently can really hit the ball out of the ballpark and hit the ball with authority. So, that's sort of what it comes down to in the first place, and we'll see if the other tools allow him to have success in Altoona.
Well, man, this just gets me all excited. I mean, people don't understand like how I look forward to every single time. I mean, I live over here by the airport in Pennsylvania, over here at Pittsburgh International Airport, but driving out to Altoona it's like almost like a pilgrimage every year. I look forward to it. My family looks forward to it every year. But all this stuff is getting me excited for Curve baseball. I also, we talked about this before, is I'm one of those people that want to see the Curve do well, not only in players individually, but just for, the city of Altoona. I would like to see when the Curve's on the top of those standings. Jon, this is always a pleasure, man. Always great to talk to you. And for people that don't follow Jon Mozes, once again, that's Jon without an H and at, spelled with a Z. And we are going to get into some beer reviews. A pitcher of beer, a pitcher of beer. Let's order another pitcher of beer. That pitcher of beer should come over here. I love that pitcher of beer. I did not get a chance to get any local beers for you guys this time, and I feel like that I'm kind of failing on that end a little bit. I definitely want to do better with that. A lot of this has had to do with sickness in the family and not being able to get out, and then traveling to St. Louis. to visit my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, have my daughter tour St. Louis University. So I definitely got to get better with that. But I decided to bring, if I had to pick, my favorite, maybe a little bit under the radar brewery in St. Louis. I mean, obviously out there, Budweiser is going to be number one. As far as the craft beer scene, Urban Chestnut, and I love Urban Chestnut. When I went out there last year, and I did a Meet Me in St. Louis podcast. I did the Urban Chestnut beers. This is a great brewery out there. It is Four Hands Brewing. I've had, I'm going to count them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of their beers throughout my times visiting out there. Also, when my sister-in-law and brother-in-law come into town, sometimes they stash some away in the luggage that they've checked and had some of that. So I'm going to review 5 of these beers for you. I'm going to go with the 3 that I've had previously and then the 2 that I had this last time I was out here at a great place called the Armory. It was an old military armory that they kind of turned into a fun zone for adults. But on Saturdays and Sundays during the day, the kids can be there as well. They had 8-person foosball tables. They had beer pong with just like a little bit of water in it there. They had giant ping pong tables. They also had ones with giant paddles where you're hitting a soccer ball, video games, just a great time out there. But in the time that I was there previously, the citywide Pils, their Pilsner coming in at 5.5%. Give this one a 425, knock it down to 375. The Incarnation IPA, and I believe this is the first one I ever had from them, coming in at 7%. Give this one a 400, knock it down to 350, a little bit on the heavier side. Divided Sky Rye IPA coming in at 6.5%. Give this one a 375. And because it was a little bit of a different tasting IPA, the Rye IPA, I only put that down by 0.025%. So knock that one down to a 350. The last time I was out there at the Armory, I had the citywide American Pale Ale, and they have a citywide series that has like the Pils, the Stouts, the Pale Ales, the IPAs. It's a great series that they have out there. But the citywide American Pale Ale coming in at 5.5%, which is the same as the Pils. I gave this one a 475. Bring it down to 425. And then my favorite beer that I've had from the Four Hands Brewing, it was a collaboration, Parker Pilsner, coming in at 5%. This was a very full flavored Pilsner, almost had a little bit of a hoppiness to it. Was the favorite beer that I have, and this one is going to be one of maybe 4 or 5 beers that I've ever given the batting 500 on the weighted based on batting average scale. Knock that one down to 450. The Parker Pilsner, I believe this one is a limited release. So anybody that's listening to this and is going to be out in the St. Louis area, go out and get that one. Next week, hoping to bring you it's going to be the Greensboro 2024 preview. The week after that, I will actually be down in Bradenton, so hopefully doing one on site someplace at one of the breweries, something I did last year. But until then, let's go Indians, let's go Curve, let's go Hoppers, let's go Bradenton Marauders, let's go Bucs.